Welcome to History Stories Dose, one story 10 parts, subscribe now.
At the Battle of Issus, the great king of Persia fled from the battlefield. For the first time in centuries, the Persian Empire showed a crack in its armor, and Alexander's name commanded immediate fear across the ancient world. But winning a single battle didn't win the war. The undefeated Persian navy still controlled the Mediterranean, sitting directly behind Alexander's marching army. Looking at this map of the coast, the strategic reality is clear. To disable that fleet, Alexander had to march south along the shore and physically capture the naval bases by land. True imperial conquest requires total logistical dominance. A battlefield victory is only temporary if an enemy fleet can still cut off your supply lines from the sea. As the Macedonian army moved south, city after city surrendered without a fight. Yet one city refused to bow, the ancient maritime superpower of Tyre. This diagram illustrates why Tyre felt so secure. The city sat on an island nearly a kilometer offshore, protected by 150-foot stone walls that rose directly out of the Mediterranean. Alexander tested their resolve, demanding entry to offer sacrifices at the temple of the god Melkart. The Tyrians locked their gates. His military commanders looked at the open water and the massive walls, advising him to bypass the island entirely. They saw an impossible task. Alexander built his power on the reputation of invincibility. For a conqueror in his position, walking away from a direct challenge presented an existential threat to his authority. Since he lacked a navy to cross the water, Alexander ordered his men to construct a massive stone land bridge. His army gathered huge rocks, heavy timber, and shoreline debris, and pushed it all into the churning sea. This timeline tracks the progress. For 7 months, soldiers extended a causeway meter by meter toward the city walls. The Tyrians countered, launching a burning ship packed with combustibles directly into the Macedonian siege machines, incinerating the front line. To protect his exposed engineers, Alexander pivotally gathered a new fleet from allied cities, finally creating the naval blockade necessary to shield the construction. With the fleet holding back the Tyrian navy, the causeway finally reached the island. Massive siege towers and battering rams were pushed across the completed bridge. Once a section of the wall collapsed, Alexander personally led the assault. The Macedonian soldiers poured through the breach, engaging in fierce street-to-street combat until Tyre fell. The total destruction of Tyre sent a clear regional message. Geographical defenses, no matter how absolute, could not protect those who defied the Macedonian king. Alexander's arrival in Egypt contrasted sharply with the violence at Tyre. Instead of siege engines, he was met with open gates and public celebrations. For centuries, the Egyptians had lived under oppressive Persian rule. They viewed Alexander as a liberator who finally removed their foreign occupiers. Alexander assimilated into the culture immediately. He allowed Egyptian priests and temples to honor him, gaining religious legitimacy that the Persians never possessed. His role now shifted from a general destroying an old empire to a creator designing a new one. He personally selected a site on the coast to serve as a permanent cultural hub. This plan for Alexandria, with its wide streets and massive harbors, was designed to connect trade routes across distant lands. In founding Alexandria, Alexander established the physical and economic infrastructure for his new realm, creating a center for commerce and learning that would outlast his own life. Leaving his new city behind, Alexander took a small group of companions and marched into the blinding heat of the Egyptian desert. He was heading for the remote Siwa Oasis, the site of the Temple of Amun and its revered oracle. The journey pushed his men to their absolute physical limits. They marched through uncertain paths and endless sand, enduring the crushing weight of the desert sun. Legend claimed that when the men grew lost, they were guided by ravens and snakes. These stories added a layer of mystery to a track that few others would have dared to attempt. The isolation of the desert replaced the logistical noise of the march. Alexander arrived at the oasis having survived the extremes of the sand, finally reaching the temple gates for a meeting that would change the course of his reign. Alexander stepped into the sanctuary alone. What happened between the king and the priests remains one of history's great mysteries. Ancient sources record that the oracle did not greet him as a mortal man. Instead, the priest addressed him as the son of the god Amun. Alexander emerged from the temple with an unshakable confidence. He now believed that fate had chosen him for extraordinary, divine achievements. He left Egypt having secured a new region, founded a future megacity, and received direct religious validation for his authority. But to the east, Darius III was gathering another massive army. The Persian king was preparing a final confrontation to stop the Macedonian advance. The upcoming battle was a terminal collision between a desperate king protecting his inheritance and a conqueror who now believed he was an unstoppable god.